Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Good morning and welcome to Life Planning 101. My name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group right here in the great town of Eastland, Texas. I was driving my kid to the doctor yesterday, had to get him out of school just a little bit early. And so it happened to be right before the closing bell on Wall Street. And we're sitting there, of course, listening to Money News. You know, my kid just loves me, right? I'm turning into that person that my dad was. I'll never forget long trips, but that's a side note. So anyway, listen to the closing bell and he goes, "Mom, is that your school bell?" I thought that was good because, yes, actually, it is my school bell in a lot of ways. We get schooled every day, don't we, when it comes to investments, life planning, everything about money. There's always something to be learning, and that is what we do here on Life Planning 101. And today is absolutely no different. In fact, we are going to be talking about investments. We are going to be talking about the specific times. And there's some words of wisdom that we have always had in I guess, as an American culture. And it's an adage that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I have a question of, is that really true to the extent that we make it true in all cases? Because they are words of wisdom, but they can also be words of catastrophe. And the reason I want to bring this to light is, we're going through some very turbulent times with the financial markets. We're going through times that most money managers haven't seen in their lifetime anything like it. And even if you were around to experience the last time that there was high inflation and rising interest rates, do you remember it well? That's really the question. Or are you still practicing in the same capacity? And so we're having to turn to a lot of wisdom these days. We're having to turn to a lot of history books these days to try to figure out what's going on and what we should be doing and what this means for today and what this means for our future. I often think that people forget sometimes that products, most financial products, are somehow tied to interest rates. Somehow. Even insurance products. In fact, insurance products like life insurance, annuities, those things are tied to interest rates in a big way. And so you got to ask, during this little spike, what is that actually doing to the investments that I'm making today, but also the investments that I already have in play? A lot of people have a lot of life insurance already. They have annuities already. Are those still good? My dad's always saying, do you have the old product or the new product? And he does it a little satirically. And the reason he does it that way is because you could buy something yesterday and it's really the old product. It's not the new product. And unfortunately, it's just hard to understand what you really have going on. And when you go, and I'm not going to poke fun at, insurance agents, but in a way I am, because and this works in the investment world too, okay? So if you think about it, and I am an insurance agent, so I can't poke fun, but there's this thing called a captive agent. And that means, and you've seen them everywhere, they work for one company, and so they sell that one company's products. They might have a few products that they can get outside that company when they can't use their company's products, but really they're an agent for that company. So if you're going to them to get financial advice, their toolkit is what their toolkit is. There's no looking outside of that toolkit. And so they find what they have that fits. And they really don't even sometimes know what other people's toolkits are, right? And the same thing works in the investment world. You see these chain investment companies. Well, a lot of times they have these proprietary products, or they have certain amounts of certain investments that they need the investment advisor to be selling or putting out there for their clients during a certain period of time. So it's the same thing. They've got this this toolbox, and then there's this really shiny tool in that toolbox that they want to use, right? So the question is that really the right situation for you if you're going in there? And do you know? And I would say you don't. Humbly say you don't. And does the advisor or the insurance agent know? And I would say probably 95% of the time the answer is no, because they don't know what other options are out there. This is why we've had so much regulation, I believe, come down the pipeline with the best interest of forcing agents and forcing advisors to look at multiple different options for rolling over 401k money, IRA money, those types of things is they got to say what else is out there. And it's been our experience that, when we start working with someone, they usually have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different advisors that they've had over their lifetime. Sometimes their investments and insurance is split between them. Sometimes it's 1 or 2. Sometimes it is just one. And it's kind of been with a company we've talked about. So, when we go to look at that, does it really make sense per their situation? And so when we talk about having all your eggs in one basket, if you've got it spread out, who's really looking at that basket? And I love Elon Musk's quote. He has a quote that I think is so applicable to this. And it says, it's okay to have your eggs in one basket as long as you control what happens to that basket, right? And here's what I would say is if you have your eggs in multiple baskets, who's controlling the multiple baskets? And if that's you, do you feel like you have the appropriate expertise to know what you really have going on? And if you do, I would even say during today's time, you need to be stress testing that because we're going through a change. Things are happening. Things are very different than they were even a year ago today. And, stress testing that. So for example, let's say you're supposed to have a bunch of retirement money and you've got it spread out. You need to stress test to see if that still works. We had a couple come to us and they had a big annuity. They had a big life insurance policy, and that life insurance policy had cash value that they were supposed to be able to borrow against, and that was going to act like a loan, and that was going to be part of their retirement. And then they had like a bucket of Vanguard ETFs. Okay. So we looked at this and we put in what they were wanting to do. We actually built out their financial plan. There was a 0% chance of success. 0. Not 10, not 20, not 30, not 40, not 50. It was 0. A 0%. And here they are, already retired, just looking for someone to help them with that next stage of life. And they had accumulated these assets by putting them in different, working with different advisors and having multiple buckets, thinking everything was going to work out okay, right? Well, there was risk written all over that thing, and unwinding it is even more difficult because, sometimes, and I'll give you an example, like if you've got annuities, you probably know that you have surrender charges in those annuities, but what did you lose over that time frame? We came in across another couple that was, they had this annuity and it had guaranteed income riders on it. And there was a floor. So if the market went down, it wasn't going to go down, and they liked all of that. Well, when we finally get to the idea of, and we're always about, don't look at the money for what it is, look at what it's for. So when we figure out what it's for and they're saying, well, really that money is for our legacy, and we figure out what their real risk tolerance is and everything else, the loss leader on that money has been over the last 10 years about 100% because they had it in a wrong vehicle that really wasn't helping them to accomplish their goals. And they're paying for bells and whistles on a product that they will never even use. And so now to get out of said product, they are going to have to, surrender the policy, and it's almost out of surrender period. So that's not bad. But they've lost all of those fees that they've paid over the years. And if they were, and there is a little gain in the policy. So, if they want to take it outright, they may have to pay taxes if they don't want to roll it into something else. And then on top of all that, they've got the income rider that if they were to turn that on, the way that the policy works, if one of them or if both of them were to die and they don't get everything out first, then the kids would get nothing. So it really accomplishes nothing they were trying to do. And so, but here again, they had their assets spread across about 5 different advisors thinking, oh, well, we like the sounds of that, or we like the sounds of that. So don't put all your eggs in one basket, or should you? Should you be heeding more what Elon Musk says, that it's okay to have them in one basket as long as you are in control of what happens to that basket? Or likewise, it may be okay to have them in multiple baskets as long as you know or you're able to control who's in charge of all of those baskets, and those baskets are working together and not against each other. So more on this subject when we come back on Life Planning 101. You're not going to want to miss it. Welcome back to Life Planning 101. My name is Angela Robinson with Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. Be sure to visit us online at www.kennedy-financial.com. Sign up for our weekly newsletter. We've got great content. We have black and white market chatter every single week. I know during these turbulent market times, it's always great to just get some down-to-earth advice of what's going on, or what we're seeing. And that's exactly what our investment team is doing, which I just love that they've created that value add for everyone. But all of this information is free. Get on and listen to it. One of the things we've always believed in is education. My dad founded the firm in 1989. And that's been big for us. We started this firm by doing college courses through 4 different colleges at that time. And, just really teaching people everything they could know about retirement. We thought we could teach them. And my dad will tell you, you learned real quick that you'd go through a 4-night course and then people would say, well, now what do we do next? And the reality is there's so much complication. And that was back in 1989. And today it's even worse, right? We've got the internet that can tell you anything you want if you just Google the question the right way. So it makes it worse. But in reality, going back to the 80s, and what we're talking about today of not putting all your eggs in one basket, the 80s was a very popular time to have a multitude of professionals. In fact, it was kind of one of those times that if the more professionals you had, the more success it said you had, right? You had a banker, you had a tax guy, you had an insurance guy, you had multiple stockbrokers, you had an attorney for your business, you had an attorney for your personal stuff, you had a real estate guy. There really wasn't this thing called financial planner. Your insurance guy, probably if you had a life insurance guy that was good, they probably did a lot of your estate planning and helped guide along that way. But today it looks a little bit different from that. The professional team is different, but it doesn't look different from that in that you have still a multitude of professionals that you're going to for any one thing. And I think this is, a common misthread is we just ask, well, what do you do when you need to file your taxes? Well, you go to an accountant. Well, what do you do when you need to get your homeowner's insurance? Well, you go to an insurance agent. Well, what do you do if you need life insurance? Well, you go to an insurance agent. What do you do if you need to start an IRA? Well, you go to the Edward Jones down the street. Whatever it is, however we get here. And then as your wealth grows, as your success grows, the number of professionals you have has grown, the number of baskets that you have has grown, and you're also growing a new problem because you wake up one day with so many baskets that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and that is where the recipe for catastrophe begins. We talked about some stories before the break, about a couple that had worked hard, saved hard, but just doing what we just talked about, they had a 0% chance of success in retirement based on what they wanted to do because they were using the wrong investment and insurance tools in order to get there. And it had cost them to the point that there was really no return, which is kind of scary, right? Another thing we, talks about interest rates. This is a big deal right now. This is a big deal. This is a time in history that, I'll never forget back in COVID, we were saying, don't let a good crisis go to waste, and that was one of the congressmen that had said that. And I think we're there again, right? Nobody likes this inflation. Nobody likes to hear the Fed raising interest rates again. But we have some interest rates. We have some things paying for some things. I know if you've been listening to Black and White Market Chatter, they're talking about what treasuries are paying right now, and like 1 month treasuries, right? Nothing that you're having to lock yourself into forever, which is amazing. But you also do need to be looking at that longer term stuff of what's this short-term interest rate spike allowing for things to happen? What opportunities exist out there that we need to be taking advantage of? And, sometimes I don't even think you can ask that question. In fact, I don't think you can ask that question unless you know what the money's for. Okay. So when we start to sit down with someone, we have these 3 buckets, right? And we put that in front of someone. We say, okay, a lot of people look at money for what it is. You go to one of these professionals that we talked about, and they're going to take the money that they say, okay, you say, I have $200,000 I want to invest. Okay, well, that's what it is. And they figure out your time horizon, yada, yada, yada. And they put it to work. Okay, well, we look at everything for what it's for. And what I mean by that is you got 3 buckets. You got a lifestyle bucket that you want to stuff and you want to overstuff and you want to make sure that it's there. I mean, what American doesn't want to work hard and enjoy the fruits of their labor? And, you get to a point that you've given your kids enough. You say, I don't even give them anything else, right? You just want to be able to enjoy what you've built and not have to worry about things. Not have to worry about where the dollar's coming from tomorrow. So you got that lifestyle bucket that's stuffed and overstuffed, and there needs to be plenty of money in there to be able to support that, and tools to be able to support that, and to hedge against all the risks that we've been talking about, such as, okay, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We all know how valuable an egg is right now. So if the cost of living goes up, that lifestyle bucket has to protect against that. And so knowing what that needs to look like before you determine what some $200,000 is going to do is very, very important, because someone needs to be looking at it from a holistic nature. I'll take you back to Elon Musk's quote. It's okay to have your eggs in one basket as long as you control what happens to that basket. Well, if you don't know what you're going to need, how can you control what happens? You absolutely can't. When we come back on Life Planning 101, we're going to talk about the other 2 things that your money does, and one last goodie on not putting all your eggs in one basket, or should you? Welcome back to Life Planning 101. My name is Angela Robinson. We are talking about not putting all your eggs in one basket. And no, we didn't plan this with timing of the fact that eggs are, up, I don't know how many percent, and people can barely afford them. So every egg you have is valuable, but it does work out perfect, doesn't it? Because your eggs are valuable. You worked hard for those eggs, and trying to figure out, how to protect those eggs is really important. And, we've all been in this adage that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, but nobody's managing the overall baskets to know if they're actually doing what they need to do. We look at the money too often for what it is and not for what it is for. And someone is not helping take that holistic look. And especially during these times when things are changing, products are changing, everything you thought you knew about your retirement plan needs to be tested. And you need to make sure that things are on track and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're going to be able to continue to do that, because you got to realize today is the first day of the rest of your life. How long is that going to be? Really, how long is that going to be? I mean, if you're 65 years old, if you live till 95, that is 30 years that money has to last, right? And then do you want anything left at the end of the day? Oh, and did we talk about a backup plan? What if somebody gets sick? What if something goes wrong? Have you addressed any of those things, right? So this is what we call the gaps and the overlaps. And we also call it basket fever. You feel like a basket case, and you should, because over time you've accumulated all these different eggs in all these different baskets, and you just all of a sudden can't keep up with them, and you don't know if they're working the way they're supposed to be working, and rightfully so. So, I'll take you back to 1989. We've talked a lot about history today. Our founder, Jim Kennedy, he saw this. He saw that, it wasn't getting easier. It was becoming a more complicated place. And professionals that are out there, they were good professionals. There was nothing wrong with them, but the wrong questions were getting asked, not the right questions, right? Nobody was taking the time to learn about what, Mr. and Mrs. Matriarch want, and make sure that those goals can be achieved by the products that they have, and they take that overall view of what the money is for and making sure that every dollar is maximized in the way it can. So, we don't claim to be an expert in every area. In fact, we've always said we're dangerously versed in many, but we are an expert in none. But what we are really good at is being able to look at that holistic picture, rolling up our sleeves and asking those tough questions, impelling that communication and collaboration among all your professionals to be that advocate for your family. And in fact, we love it. We absolutely love it. There is nothing better than helping people live life on purpose. There is nothing better that, and I'm blessed enough to be a second generation in this business. So we literally have clients that are still with us from the early 90s. And there's nothing better than have watched them go through a successful retirement just because they took a little time on the front end and they were humble enough to let someone help them ask those right questions. So yes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't need to do that. Nobody needs to do that, right? But you sure need to make sure you have a basket manager. And that's the key. My name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group right here in Eastland, Texas. Visit us online at www.kennedy-financial.com. Make sure you join us each and every week on Black and White Market Chatter. And don't miss next week right here on Life Planning 101. God bless and have a great week.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Don't forget to learn how our sister company can assist you with all of your tax, bookkeeping, and consulting needs. You can find out more at briscoeandassociates.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.